Welcome all to episode 30 of the Enough to Keep Going podcast. I am SwissGuard, and it is my pleasure to host tonight's GX show. Every other week, we like to take a break from discussing the higher level industry news and or more abstract gaming topics, and instead delve into actual games. As you're no doubt aware, E2KG is composed of some very quality gentlemen with jobs and families and responsibilities. And for us, gaming is a hobby that provides a moment's peace, a respite from the real world, and these virtual oases that dot our day-to-day grind are certainly enough to keep us going, thirsting for more, and but also we have the need to share the joys and frustrations of our experiences with you, dearest listeners, hence the GX podcast. Tonight, I am joined by Agasicles Stamas. It's just the two of us tonight because the other two have joys and responsibilities and families that they have to deal with. So,
right,
how are you doing tonight? Yep.
How are you?
I am adequate. So, I gotta get my agenda back up. So we 2 weeks ago, on the first of these GX shows, Zeus, Prime, DB, and I picked a game for Zeus. He provided three options, and we selected one, and he had to go out, acquire the game if he didn't already have it, and report back. And the inaugural Zeus plays, or Agasicles plays, was Air Mission's HIND. So I figure we should start with your report, and then we can flow into our normal playlist chat. So I did see that you did some live streams of it. I did not have an opportunity to purchase the game myself or any time to play it. I had some extra. The last couple of weekends I had to work on Saturday, and then this past weekend I was playing catch up on Shores because I missed the last couple of Saturdays. So I've actually not played very many games this week, unfortunately. But before the podcast, I did watch some of your streams, and I was not terribly impressed. But from your chatter during the game, it sounded like you were. So I'm curious to see what you enjoyed about it, and maybe it's not just a very streamer-friendly game.
Yeah, so it's a thing, and I'm sorry. Me trying to get the social media out is one thing, but which is going fine. But I'm further hampered tonight by Twitter's insistence on live streaming the State of the Union address while I'm trying to get the social media out, even though I don't want it on right now. So sucking up a little bandwidth and causing my PC to slow down just a little bit. So I guess I would first open with the question: are you into flight sims at all?
I guess I like the idea of them. I love Ace Combat, and when I saw the game, I kind of thought it might have been Ace Combat with helicopters, but as I was watching you play, it seems definitely to fall more on the sim side than the arcade side, and maybe that's just the disconnect for me.
Yeah, and that's interesting because actually, when you listen to Steam players, they actually think the opposite. The small number of negative opinions that I've seen levied against the game is because it's not a sim. So this is a thing. in every genre has this. I'll definitely call myself a sim guy. Back in the days of when I was reading PC Gamer, the magazine in print, Andy Mahood's section on flight sims and racing sims was always a section that I gravitated to and always read pretty much every month. And PC Gamer was one of those where they had specific writers assigned to specific genres. And I would read the magazine and read about the people who worked, into simulations. So I would say that I'm definitely in that camp. Ace Combat is a thing. I enjoy playing it. I definitely enjoy playing it on console. Air Missions HIND, I would say. So it is a little more probably on the sim end of things. For sim heads, it's not. I mean, it's not digital combat simulator by any means, or Falcon 4.0, or SU-27 Flanker, or Flaming Cliffs, or anything like that. Some of the sims that I grew up on, but it's in the ballpark, right? It's on that highway. Now what you don't get is a ton of switches to flip. And you definitely get an easier flight model. One of the things that I struggled with a little bit was that it just doesn't really model the avionics at all. It models the flight to a certain extent, but there's not a deep avionics model. But for me, the big thing is I don't necessarily need everything that a sim brings to the table to have fun in a flight action game. And I talked about that a little bit on my live stream. What I need is I need those control surfaces and just that differentiation in terms of vehicular dynamic. The fact that it's an aircraft and not a car, or a spacecraft, or any of the other kind of simulations that I play. It harkens back to my days as a Cold War kid. And Top Gun, right? So anything that gives me that feeling of like being in the movie Top Gun is sufficient. And in Top Gun, they didn't go through the 97-step checklist that you have to go through before you can launch the F-14 Tomcat, right? So it provided that effect. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
It's funny you mentioned Top Gun, because this was one of my I don't want to say criticisms and my limited exposure to your live stream, but what's the famous line from Top Gun? I feel the need for speed. And when I was watching the game, it just looked lethargic, moving around. And maybe that's just because it's a helicopter.
Yes. Yeah. So tank, helicopter drivers are not like pilot jocks, right? Airplanes move at Mach 2. Helicopters are designed to crawl to a hover if they need to. So it's a little more analogous to flying something like an A-10 Warthog, if you're looking for a plane analog. But they are graceful in their own way. And if anybody sees those parts of the live stream, there's still very much an adversarial high that you get off of it, right? The one I wish you had a chance to watch was the very last one, where the last 5 minutes of the last one, because the last live stream about mission 7 or 8 into the single player campaign, you get thrown this training mission to try and master the manually steered missiles, which I couldn't stand, because in other flight sims that I've played, when you have a munition that you can manually take control of, it typically snaps you into a camera view that's mounted in the warhead, right, in the bullnose of the missile. This didn't do that, so, and I don't know if I'm missing something, but you can manually guide the missile, but you're guiding it by sight, and that's very difficult to do when you're trying to shoot a tank, and the whole point of it is for you to be standing off away from the tank, outside of the tank's range. So I struggled with that a little bit until I realized that those missiles also work fine as direct fire weapons. So as long as I have the targeting pip, on a tank, and I pickle that missile, it's fine. I don't need to manually guide it. But I struggled to get through that training mission, and then I struggled with the follow-on scenario. And this is Ace Combat definitely does this, and it tests my endurance sometimes. Ace Combat in particular suffers from that flight sim flight action game trope of these very long missions that never end, right? It's like you defeat one thing and you think the mission's over, and then they go, oh no, but blah, blah, blah is on its way in from, 270 degrees, and you're like, man, I just got done taking down like 24 fighter aircraft. I've been in this cockpit, for 45 minutes already. What more do you want of me? And what's particularly frustrating, and again, Ace Combat does this as well. Air Missions HIND did this to me last night. Is then when Ace Combat does a better job of it. When you fail, you get kicked back to a checkpoint, right? With Air Missions HIND, something was going on where. Sorry, I'm just trying to silence these alerts. Something was going on where when I would fail a mission, it would always kick me back to the very beginning of the mission, regardless of if I had defeated like a certain wave and there was like a little cut-in of dialogue from like an NPC. So I didn't really understand that. But at any rate, I'd failed a mission a couple times through a couple different stages or checkpoints. I was finally in the third phase, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound very Top Gun-ish, but this is why I like doing live streams, because you can have people watch it instead of doing this flying hands thing. But I was getting very low on ammo. I overshot a tank that I was doing a strafing run on, and the way I had been failing the missions is you do this one wave where there's just a huge mass of enemies. It's a mix of ground troops, artillery, and armored personnel carriers, but nothing as heavy as a tank. So I defeated that big wave. In the second wave, 4 tanks show up, and in the last wave, 4 more tanks. In the second wave, 4 tanks show up, but they're pretty much stationary. In the third wave, you get tanks that show up. They all come in from different sides of the town, and they're all moving. And you have a time limit to take these tanks out. So I was trying, and a few times I had failed both of those last 2 phases of the mission on the last tank. So I was doing a strafing run on a tank. I overshot it. I was desperate to kill it because I was like, I can't take failing this thing again on the last tank. So I tried to pitch upwards and twist, but the Mi-24 HIND is a big, fat, difficult to maneuver aircraft. Not difficult, but it's if you're over aggressive with it, it gets away from you. And so I overshot the thing. I initially leveled out. I tried to pitch up and twist and point down, and I did. But when I did, my targeting pip was I had a couple seconds to get shots off before I was overshooting the tank again. And in an effort to maximize my amount of time with him in my target reticle, I then I banked the aircraft and started to rapidly drop my altitude. So I was doing this kind of sideways sliding, downward twisting thing, and I killed the tank. And and on the live stream, I mean, it's a whole like woohoo because I was like, I finally defeated it. I was actually, and this is again one of the reasons why we game right is because it's not just the mechanics, but you're looking for that emotional thing, and it felt like defeating a major enemy, like in a military operation. So yeah, as long as the game does that for me, it's in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it can draw you in, which is why I'm hesitant to draw too many conclusions from watching, just watching and not experiencing it myself, because when you're in the cockpit, you can let yourself be absorbed. Even if it's third person, you can still let yourself be absorbed into the mission. And it's kind of hard to do that as a spectator. I was watching, and it looked like a vast, brown map with some red diamond reticles, and you'd shoot at the little diamonds, and there'd be a tiny puff of flame. And every now and then you'd get down close to the ground but it was still kind of, nothing overtly cinematic, shall we say. So,
well, right. But that's one of the things with flight sims, right? So when you fly a flight sim or flight action game, I spend most of my time in the cockpit, which is different than a racing game, which everybody tells me is weird, right? So in a racing game, I tend to drive like in that camera view that's outside and behind the car.
Mm-hmm.
In a flight simulator, I tend to fly in the cockpit, even with something like Ace Combat. Where now a real hardcore flight sim, I don't think you can fly effectively like from an outside the aircraft view. You really have to be in the cockpit to see all the avionics. But something like Ace Combat, which is a little more arcadey, you can fly outside the aircraft, and that's where you get those cinematic views, right? If you're coming at it from Ace Combat, you can fly outside the aircraft and you can see a lot more of the sky battle going on. But the other big thing is what Ace Combat does is when you kill somebody, you normally get this like 3-second like cinematic like swooshing video cut of you killing the aircraft, right? So you don't get that in something that's a little more like, but it's very the game to me, and I know, like I said, some of the hardcore flight sim audience disagrees, but to me the game is very tactical, it's very pragmatic. That mission last night, which is a huge honking mission where there's tons of aircraft, tons of ground enemies. I'm constantly replotting like where I'm going to come in from, right? I do an attack run, and on the exit from that attack run, I have to distance myself from enemies, and then I got to flip around and decide, okay, what enemies are left? Where am I going to come in from? And then with those tanks showing up, that they're completely different enemy because they're much more heavily armored. They require different munitions. How you take them on is different, and that constantly like that dynamic flow on the battlefield is the thing that hooked me. You mentioned it was like a big brown battlefield, but probably one of the missions you didn't see is I flew an older Russian aircraft. It's called the HIP, I think, and I'm familiar with a lot of the Cold War era helos, but I'm not familiar with the HIP. But I flew that aircraft. It's a lot more difficult to fly. It can actually carry bombs, so that's a different munition. And we were attacking a convoy, which was on the move, which again is a much different tactical situation. And they were driving through a canyon. Now, when you're firing weapons, you're not necessarily watching the mountains around you that you may crash into. So it was a very white knuckle tense event. So, but that's another one of the things that I like. The single player campaign. It's unfortunately it's not a dynamically generated mission, which is something that like Falcon 4.0 would do. You would get missions, but they would be entirely different every single time. You might have a strike mission to take out a SAM site, but each time you play that mission, the SAM site's in a different location. The enemy order of battle is going to be different. Your package is going to be different, etc. But even though this game doesn't do dynamically generated missions, it still gives you a healthy amount of variety, at least for me through my first playthrough. And then I also bought the deluxe package, so I have like 3 additional aircraft to pick from to fly. That makes a difference also because they each handle differently and have different weapons available and whatnot. So I apologize that I was not able to impress you.
No, I kind of figured that as I was watching it. I was like, as you're just kind of moving forward and shooting some stuff, you're like, wow, this is great. I can't wait to play it again. And it was just like, wow, this is kind of slow to watch. But if I was the dude in the cockpit, I can kind of understand. But then again, I've never been one to actually like enjoy, watching, Twitch streams or anything like that. I can't understand my son who loves watching stuff like that. And I'm just like, dude, experience it for yourself. I don't get it. But no, it sounds like there's definitely some more variety. And that was going to be one of my questions also, because like I guess I watched the one where you're just really getting acclimated and experimenting with the game. So I didn't notice if there was a whole ton of danger. It just seemed kind of you were floating around and blowing stuff up and there really wasn't that much happening. I think there was a missile warning at one point, but I wanted to hear from you whether you actually had some like adrenaline rushes from the game, and it sounds like you did. So you have tweaked my interest. I still may check it out at some point. So
yeah, and I would say definitely if you're looking for like video evidence of higher levels of excitement, I would say watch the later live streams, especially the last one. Watch the last few minutes. Watch like the last 5 minutes of the last one, and that's really. It's not the last 5 minutes of the video. It's like the last 5 minutes of the last mission. So probably like the last 7 minutes of the video. Because the one you watched was my initial setup. And so I probably spent the first 15 minutes of that video just configuring my controls.
Yeah, fast forwarded that part.
And then it's my time out in the aircraft, right? So I had to stop a couple times and reprogram, remap some buttons. But also there's a lot I didn't understand what was going on, and it was just a shoot 'em up, right? It was instant action. It's not part of the campaign. There's zero impact from losing, right?
Okay, I didn't even realize that wasn't like a campaign mission. So that was just kind of a throw it out, like they just throw stuff out there and you go in.
Exactly. Now the map that you watched, that was the last mission from the last video. So if you think about that, what you saw me playing was just the first of 3 waves of that mission. Yeah. So it's much more. It's a little more constrained, right? Because you get. So this is part of the arcadiness of it. You can set it to allow reloads. Now you could also take those reloads away to make it more realistic. But I think in that instant action, I had like 10 reloads. Well, even in a campaign mission, you only have 3, sometimes only 2. So when you have to take down a specific set of targets, right, you can't rely on just being able to reload. But also there are consequences, right? So what you saw me playing, if that's phase 1 of a 3-part mission, if my airframe integrity gets down to like 50%, right, in that first one, that 50% has to carry me through the next 2. And the next 2 are tanks, which are, cause more damage and are harder to kill. So yeah, I would. And the other thing I would say is, I'm going to look it up really quickly if I can even get to it, because I may not have. I thought at one point I did have Steam on this PC, but one of the impacts of well, not one of the impacts, but the other thing to remember is that this is I want to say on Steam it was like $12.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an incredibly inexpensive, jaunt. And my feeling is for $12, right? I'm definitely getting my money's worth. And if I just play through the single player campaigns one time, then that'll be enough for me. But I'm also interested in getting in and checking out the multiplayer because I think. Again, not being a flight sim and not having all that cognitive overhead that you have to deal with in a flight sim, I think this would be a pretty fun game in multiplayer.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. We also have some multiplayer chat a little later in the episode. I think I want to save that for towards the end, since that's an E2KG shared experience. So I think. Do you have anything else to add about the game, or do you want to move on to our normal playlist punch list?
Yeah, let's definitely move on.
All right. So, like as I said earlier in the game, in the show, I haven't played that much this week. A lot of what I played was multiplayer, which is unusual for me because I'm more of a single player. But the first game that I want to talk about that I played was Splatoon 2 for the Switch. And right now, that's kind of the zeitgeist at my house. And I was watching other people play, and I wanted to show them how it was done. So I started playing, and then I was like, dang, this game's harder than the first Splatoon because I wasn't doing so well. But I like. You have that, don't you, Agasicles?
I actually don't. I played the test fire,
Okay.
the beta event, but I didn't bring myself around to actually purchasing it.
All right. I do definitely like the evolution of the game. There's more variety with the weapons, and I think like the special attacks are cooler. I just, for whatever reason, it just feels like I don't have as much control over the outcomes of the matches. So I have not hit level 10 quite yet. So I haven't done the ranked battles like I was doing in the original Splatoon. If you played that, you have to get to a certain proficiency before they let you into something beyond simply turf war, which is where you just splat ink. Whichever team gets the most ink on the map wins. And I think that's part of the problem is that you're dependent on your teammates, but there's not usually a lot of coordination at the lower levels.
That's also a result of Nintendo's approach to voice chat.
Yeah. But I've been it's still a lot of fun. Even when I'm losing, I can take pride in the fact that, well, even if my team lost, I put up a good fight. And you have the statistics at the end, and you can see, how many splats you had and how many times you're able to use your special. And I'm still kind of infatuated with the whole style of the game. Like, they took the concept of, being fresh. Like, it's like they took like a stereotype of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and then infused it with steroids and mixed it with the Japanese fish market. And it's like, it's just very cool. So
were there still plenty of people? I mean, is it pretty populated on the servers? There's still people playing that today in large numbers?
I don't think we have any real troubles finding matches. It's rare when we have troubles to find a match. So, and that's no. I'd like to see how it gets when I get, to the ranked levels. See if it starts to thin out. But I think people are still picking it up, and I think people are still, putting time into it. So that's cool.
Did you experience anybody participating in voice chat? Were you guys in voice chat?
Nope. I haven't even attempted it. My nephew has the game, so when we want to voice chat with him, we just use speakerphone. Beyond that, as far as like the gameplay wise, like I said, I want to say that the maps, I haven't like said to myself, wow, these maps are so much cooler than the original maps, or vice versa. It's just I have enjoyed the evolution of the character design and like I said, the weapons. For example, in this game you have like the dual pistols, which is cool, and you have it's almost like more like superhero type special attacks and just some kind of quirky things like you're in a hamster ball and you can wheel it around. It inks as you hamster ball and then you explode onto people. So you can do like this kamikaze type run. And it's a little bit more, I don't want to say it's a little bit more hectic, or in a way it's a little more lighthearted and arcadey than the first game in a weird way. The first game was so like that. It's just, they kind of increased the goofiness quotient slightly. But yeah, it's I would definitely, if you have a Switch, I'd definitely give it a shot at some point.
Now, were you playing this by yourself, or were you playing this with the family? I'm sorry if I missed that.
We only have the one Switch, so it's basically like I play a few rounds and then I get out of my profile, and my wife will play some, and then so on and so forth. But even though only one of us is playing, it's still a family activity, which is, I keep going back to our podcast, like basically the end of year award podcast that we had, Superlatives, and you were the one that picked this as the the family game, I believe.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Nope, I might change my pick at this point to that, to be honest with you.
So now you mentioned that this is a game that your wife plays by herself. So does she play multiplayer by herself? And have the two of you talked, and has her perception of the multiplayer experience been different from yours at all?
So this is the first Splatoon 2 game, and no one in my family is. Well, I guess my son is playing the single player campaign. Most of us just jumped right into multiplayer. So she's been playing multiplayer, and she's gotten to the point where, she'll call out people on her team that aren't pulling their weight. She can be like, "Oh man, I must be on a team with some little kids this time," or she always likes it when she's going up against somebody that's labeled mom or dad, because she has some a sense of camaraderie there. But yeah, we both can feel like, some days, wow, I'm just tearing it up. And then other days it's like, you can't win a match and you don't know what you're doing different. And so in that respect, we have a very similar experience. She just has more time to play than I do.
Is this her first foray into gaming?
This is her first foray into multiplayer gaming, competitive gaming, yes. And I was surprised that she took to it. So it's the Switch has definitely, so she's basically played this and Zelda significantly, but I think she's still on the lookout for other games. She's played some Mario Odyssey and it's kind of hooked her. So, I don't know if it's just Nintendo's appeal to the more casual audience, or it's just the Switch's just convenience of being undocked and still being a quality platform. But no, it's been good. My daughter's she plays pretty much exclusively ranked battles, and I don't know whether she's floating between a B or a B to C level, but that's what she likes to do, and so it's fun to talk strategy with them. They'll originally, my wife would be like, "Oh, nobody's painting around the base," and then eventually she realized, "Oh, I can't do that. I have to rush and control the middle ground." And she's not expressing it that way, but she's getting the tactical aspect of that.
No, that's very cool. That's very cool.
So,
appealing factors of HIND, even though it seems like you don't believe me, but
I'm sorry.
I was saying that's also one of the appealing factors of Air Missions HIND, but it seems like you don't believe it.
No, I believe you. It just didn't come across in a Twitch stream. All right, so we'll go from one very Japanese game to another. And you played... Now, I knew when I saw that you started this, I kind of knew where this was going to go. And then I asked myself, why is he buying another JRPG?
Well, because I bought into the E3 hype, right? And it wasn't sold as a JRPG to me. It was sold as a third-person action title on the PlayStation that was theoretically going to be shoulder to shoulder with games like Infamous and Horizon Zero Dawn. Kind of, I was thinking, and to be quite honest, so I've only played the first 40 minutes of the game. So it definitely,
for the listeners, Monster Hunter World. He picked it up.
Yes, Monster Hunter World on the PlayStation 4. I've played the first 40 minutes of the game. It definitely requires further evaluation, but I'm one of those people who likes to render opinion incrementally as I go, and then kind of see where I end up, right? Because I think an important part of any evaluation and assessment, considering a movie, right, or I do this all the time. Well, quite frankly, I do this all the time with, I don't do it anymore. When I was younger, I used to do the same thing with waiters and waitresses, right? When I went to a restaurant, everybody started at a certain baseline, and the story of my dinner, your tip would move up and down and would determine, where you would end up. But I think it's very important to cover those phases and those hills and valleys emotion that you go through when you're regarding a piece of content or something that you participate in, something that you play that's interactive like a game. So yeah, my problem with Monster Hunter doesn't have to do. A lot of people, is trying to have this conversation, and a lot of people comment or think about that it's the difficulty. It's not the difficulty. My problem is I haven't even gotten to a part of the game where difficulty would even be relevant. My problem is, and again, people will, render a different opinion and will say my viewpoint is wrong, and I can tell them that their viewpoint's wrong because it doesn't matter what their perspective is. It's my perspective as a gamer for the game that I paid my money for, right? And so the problem I'm having is, for me today, and this is a common theme on our show, right? I have a certain set amount of time to game in a given week, and what I want to do is I want to be in the game, playing the game, accruing progress as quickly as possible. I prefer games that just turn you loose and let you fail on your own as you try and figure it out than games that hold your hand. Now, I don't mind on-screen tutorials. I actually kind of like those. What I don't like is kind of arbitrary constraints. And this game's opening sequence has I guess I would say that is the entire opening sequence. It's just a series of arbitrary constraints. The whole thing starts on a ship, and then you get off the ship, and you're walking on it. I don't know how much. I mean, it shouldn't. Spoilers for this kind of mechanical stuff shouldn't really matter, but you're walking a path to try and get to safety, and it's a canned training scenario, really. This is another thing I hate about games. I don't like games that, in the introduction, only enable one control surface, right? So you've got the whole controller, but the only thing they've enabled is the left analog stick. And you can hit every single other button all you want to, but the game is locked so that the only input it's going to accept is the specific instructions that it's giving you. So there's a point where the only control you have is the left analog stick to walk around. But my problem is that, so I started following, the guide, in this case, the NPC who's out ahead of you telling you where to go. And then I tried to move left or right, and I couldn't. So the game just had me pushing forward on the left control stick, supposedly teaching me how to move. And I'm like, but I'm not learning how to move. You've got me locked, so I'm only going in one direction. And then my last few minutes of play, then there's another series of events. Almost everything in that opening sequence is kind of a quick-timey kind of event.
Okay, he does.
Right. And it snaps back and forth between cinematic presentation and then all of a sudden you're in a quick-time event. And then the most insulting thing, at the end of this 40 minutes, which I think was the end of the introductory kind of training session, you go and meet this group of people to help them, to eventually use your powers or whatever. And they tell you, we've got to have a meeting, go away, get familiar with the town. And then when you hear the bell or whatever, that the meeting's over, and then we'll be available to talk to you. You're given a guide who's another monster hunter. Dude literally physically walks you around the entire base. Like, instead of you getting a map and him talking to you and you just being able to mouse over your cursor and get the name, here's the armorer, right, to pop up, you're locked into this cinematic, and he literally takes you physically to every shop in the town. And he's like, here's our blacksmith, right? Here's where you can go to do blah, blah, blah. And then you have some quick dialogue sometimes with the owner. But I'm like, this is wasting my time. I was so angry because I'm like, I haven't experienced combat at all in this first 40 minutes, right? I've got nowhere near it. So yeah, from my perspective, playing the single player campaign, it was incredibly frustrating. And
now, did you ever get to the point where you had combat, and was it?
No.
So you just you might come back to it maybe.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to come back to it at least once, and it's good for you to bring up that angle, right? Because, like I said, a lot of people will say it's a 60-hour plus game, and you're complaining about like the first hour, and I'm like, but my time is precious. If I can't stay awake long enough, right, to get to the 50 hours of gameplay, then I'm not going to keep doing that, right? So, so I'm going to give it at least one more go. But the quick hit for me is it's got to get me into the actual combat within that next hour because Air Mission's high, and I had like 15 minutes, which is pretty short, by the way, for like a flight sim or flight action game. I spent about 15 minutes getting everything set up, configured, and ready to start playing the campaign. That's a really short timeline for something that is close to being a sim. So in this case with Monster Hunter, what I wish they would have done is given you the option, right? Either had you option A, just throw me right into the game and the single player campaign, or option B, let me play through the initial story elements. So it just frustrated me a great deal.
I think kind of circling back a little bit to the Splatoon 2, I think that's one of the things that appeals to me, but also as far as like from my wife's perspective, you can jump into a match. The match lasts 3 minutes, and then you can bail if you need to. And I know that's probably like a lot of competitive games. Although PUBG match, that's going to last significantly more time. But Splatoon, you got some quick hits. I was curious I wanted to hear whether once you got in, if the gameplay was fun. I wanted to mention in my Splatoon talk, like I enjoy the whole. It's weird when like you're a squid going through the ink, but I like that flow of the game, and like you pop up and you can shoot, and then you're a squid and you slide around, and it's just a very I literally enjoy like the movement in the game. The combat's fun, but like just this I call it silky smooth movement in the game it's a joy for me to just control the character, which is in a lot of games you don't really think about it too much. So that's a plus for it, but I understand they're very different games. I played Horizon Zero Dawn, but I play that every week, and my I don't think I've talked much about the story. I have enjoyed the story mode. There's kind of two main plot lines that you end up with, where one is kind of like a current event type thing in that world, and the other is kind of an exploration more of Aloy's origins, so to speak. I guess they do cross over, but for the most part, there's like actually I have two main quests, and I just finished one of them up. But I've enjoyed the characters, the NPCs for the most part. Good voice acting, and the missions are a little repetitive in that a lot of it is like you go to a site and you use your focus and you find A, B, or C object, and eventually it's going to lead you somewhere where you have to fight some machines or people or both. So, but I like fighting them, and I like the adaptability. I'm constantly having to reevaluate my strategy. My son was watching me play this weekend, where I was trying to take on like a Stormbird, which is like this giant bird one, and I had just upgraded my rope caster weapon. And I'm like, I probably should try to use this rather than stand here and attempt to shoot it with arrows while I get pelted. And it's amazing when you find the right strategy how fast you can take something down. So that was pretty cool. And my son felt all smart because he was like, "Dad, use your rope caster." And when I did, I won. So he pretty much took credit for the victory. But yeah, I won't get too much into it. it's moved it up my list. Like I really like that game. It's I don't know if it's going to be a top 10 Greg Switzer of all time type game, but you know, it's very, very good. And it's, for me, it was the reason that was what tipped the scales for me to go ahead and upgrade to the PS4, seeing that game. And I'm really glad I picked it up. But so between Monster Hunter World, which is a gritty game, and Air Missions HIND, which is arcadey a little bit, but some like a gritty, realistic thing, you did Tabletop Racing World Tour.
Yeah, and actually, because we're getting close to the end of the show, I'm gonna do a inline agenda change. So because right before I got on, I had already started my next gaming arc, and what I spent some time playing was Strider. I don't know if you remember this game, but Strider was an old game made in like the 1990s, and then in 2014 it was brought out of mothballs, and they modernized it for today. So it's a 2D side-scrolling action adventure game.
Okay.
PC. It was sold. I bought it through Steam, and yeah. So it's a gorgeous presentation style, and it's kind of weird because as I was playing it, I felt like it. I was like, if I had to describe this, I would call it. And I just lost it. It's very much kind of like a Devil May Cry in 2D. It's just this really bombastic kind of hyper action game that's just beautiful. That you can play it very tactically, but you can also button mash your way through the challenge of a level. So I spent about like
the video here, and it looks almost like anime Contra, like.
Yeah, it's very super stylistic. It's very super stylistic. Yeah, Ninja Gaiden came to mind while I was playing it. So it's a long time for me to get around to it in my backlog, but I kind of had a blast playing that, especially in a year following when I played what was it called, Metroid Samus Returns on my Nintendo 3DS. And there was one other kind of like non-2D game that this game like reminds me of, but yeah, it's just super styled and kind of over the top. And Crysis 2, that's the thing I was thinking of. It made me feel like a 2D. It gave me the feelings that I felt while I was playing Crysis 2, but in 2D. And my big thing about Crysis 2 is that Crysis 2 is a game that makes you feel powerful as your character, kind of right off the bat. Which just gives you more time to really try and figure out other, other moves and stuff that you can do in the game to, kind of. I don't know. I keep trying to come up with a word to describe it. It's like it's like water painting, by playing games, because your movements have these nice light trails and stuff, and it's just a gorgeously rendered game.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they put some time and thought and effort into it. It's not like a lot of times like some of these. It's published by Capcom, so it's not really. I wouldn't call it indie. But a lot of these indie games, like they go kind of pixelated, but on the other hand, I think that it's just kind of it could be argued that it's stylized, but on the other hand, it's also kind of cheap in a way. But it looks like it's only $15, so that should be an interest if you're looking for like some just kind of nice 2D action type thing. That's not a expensive pickup.
Right, and just to call back to our earlier discussion about Air Missions HIND, so that game is $20 on Steam. So, and I think I closed it too, but so it's $17 on Steam by itself. If you buy it with all of the DLC, which gives you 3 additional aircraft to fly, it's $20. So,
Yeah.
For $20, I definitely feel like it meets the minimum, fun requirement.
The minimum fun requirement. I like how that. I'm gonna let's see minimum MFR. So okay, we should start using that. All right. So if you have anything else to add about Strider, or you want to move on to the last game of the night?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So last Saturday night, Agasicles and I got together on PS4, and we played a little Uncharted 4 multiplayer co-op survival mode. And I think he live streamed it, so you can see our. I think you held your own, but I'll be like the weird guy, the gimpy sidekick that was the liability, but still had fun. So that was. I have never played an Uncharted game. I actually have all, I guess, 4 mainline Uncharted games because I have the Uncharted collection, which is the 1 through 3 on PS4, and I got Uncharted 4, and I think I got them basically when I got my PS4. They kind of were all bundled somehow. So my brother-in-law borrowed Uncharted 1 through 3, and I haven't seen that yet. And Agasicles asked if I want to do any gaming, and that's Uncharted 4 is actually the only PS4 game I have right now that's a multiplayer, like kind of co-op type game. So that became the game, and I did a little bit of the tutorial ahead of time to get familiar with the controls, and I kind of liked when I was initially going through the little practice thing. I liked using the cover and whatnot. You have a specific button that you will put yourself behind a barrier or whatever. I didn't find that so much effective when we're actually playing the game. It just felt very like one of the mission modes, and I know you'll have an opinion on this, but like the missions where we had to defend a specific area and you have to get like 15 kills. But the only way you can get a kill is siege mode. The only way you can get a kill is if you're within like the bounds of the area, which is very small and not terribly protected. So I felt like I was running around spastically, and when you went down, and like I'd heal you, and what's the first thing you say like when you're about to get healed? Jump up and down and roll.
Yeah, roll and run away.
Yeah. So it just felt like Three Stooges with guns in a way sometimes.
Yeah, but as I mentioned, I felt like the same way after DBQ, but I played that one time. I feel like what's vital is for us to get a third person in there, and I've got to look it up. I can't remember if 3 people is the max in survival mode for co-op, but whatever the maximum number of people is, I think that's the critical point. I think it's just really difficult for just 2 people to.
It just really is disappointing that they don't like throttle it for 2 people, because like I definitely just felt like the missions where we did well were the ones where we could just like run and gun. So you know what I mean? So we could use the movement throughout the level to kind of thin out their herd, and then we could tactically take down. Okay, I want to go after that guy. Here's some cover, and I can do it. But when I was constrained, it was a little rough. I liked. I mean, I enjoyed my time playing it because, to be honest, when you were getting the live stream set up, I was starting to nod off, and I was worried I was going to fall asleep before we actually started the game. And but then we started, and all of a sudden it was like midnight, and I was like, "Dang, I got to go to bed." So
yeah, we probably left unchecked and undisciplined. We probably could have and would have played far past our bedtimes,
right,
and lost a lot of sleep that night. Because it's I mean, we played on the easiest level, and it was still difficult, and but it was difficult. But for every run that you hated, right? Because we felt like we just got spawn killed out of nowhere. There were runs where we either defeated the level or or came so close to it, and we're like, we got to run it back like one more time, right? So,
and I did appreciate the variety that they did. So we were just doing survival mode, but instead of it just being wave after wave after wave, they just kind of throw, okay, this is the first round, this is what's going to happen to you. And they're a little bit different each time. And then they do like the mirroring. But they do it where it's like the game loads and then it does like a swoosh and it mirrors. So you kind of experience the mirror happening. Not that I had any like mental map of the level anyways, but I appreciated that. So it had a little variety. What do you think? Did you enjoy, do you feel like you had a lot of control over the character? Do you like that third person shooter setup?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even though we kind of stumbled and fell a lot, very frequently, I still felt like overall it was a rewarding experience. So yeah, I mean, I had fun. Absolutely.
Yeah. I definitely want to try and play again. So even though I have those complaints a little bit about the game, they're complaints that are also carrots for me to attempt to conquer the game. So it's getting a little bit late, so I think we can move on to the last segment of the show. Should be quick. So Agasicles last time we picked Air Mission's HIND for him, and this week, as I am hosting, it's my turn to put up some options and hear what the team has to say. So my theme this week is the "You Never Played That" edition, and so I have The Witcher for PC. I actually have all 3 Witcher games on Steam, and I've never played any of them. And until I get my next rig built, which I bought some of the components already, I'm not going to try to play Witcher 3. and I am too OCD to start at Witcher 2 before trying Witcher 1. So hence it is Witcher 1. The next option is the God of War piece. I figured, okay, we'll start with the first one. They remastered it on PS3. Should be cheap to pick up. With God of War, I don't know if they're technically calling it God of War 4. I think it's just called God of War for the PS4. With this new iteration, it re-piqued my interest in the franchise, and I would like to give it a whirl. And the last option has been a game that I've been meaning to play because it got such good reviews, and it looks like, I do enjoy like with Horizon Zero Dawn, a nice cinematic experience from time to time. The Last of Us, the remastered edition on PS4. I've never played Last of Us, and I want to check it out at some point. So I did hear from DB. I don't think I heard from Prime, but we'll see if you end up agreeing with DB or not. And we'll figure out a tiebreaker if you didn't.
Yeah, so I got all of the votes. Okay. I am now pleased to inform you that your game assignment for the next 2 weeks, your Swiss plays, is God of War, PS3 remastered.
Was that a unanimous vote, or was it a 2-1 vote?
It was 2-1. So Prime wanted you to play The Witcher.
Now, Prime and I, we always seem to see eye to eye.
Right.
Yeah, so actually God of War was the third one that I threw in there because I really wanted you guys to pick between The Witcher and The Last of Us. And then I saw God of War, and then I was like, well, maybe I'll try that one out. And then I saw that you picked it, and I'm like, dang it, I'm going to have to play God of War. But, it's enough where I did want, I am intrigued by it, but I was a little bit hoping it would have been the other two.
Right.
And it's natural that Prime would have seen the same.
Right. Now, my reason, I can't speak for DBQ, but my reason for picking God of War for you is because we are on the eve of the release of the new God of War, and I wanted you to at least have some time with the title right before the new one releases. So you kind of have in your mind already whether or not you were going to get the new one.
Okay. Makes total sense. And it's basically my reasoning as well. So
Right.
I will pick that up at GameStop this weekend. and I will report back in 2 weeks what I felt about it. DB was curious. I saw kind of whether he thought I would think that the mechanics held up.
Right.
I'm not one to worry too much about going to play an older title, so that's a little bit less of a concern for me. But he also did mention being able to just look at the new game in a new light with having the experience from the past titles. So
yep,
I will do that.
Yes, definitely in sync on that.
All right, so we're at exactly 60 minutes, and I think that's about it. Did you have any announcements before we sign off?
No, we're definitely firmly back to business as usual. So just subscribe to the channel, E2KG Network on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter by the same name. So yeah.
All right. With Agasicles, I'm SwissGuard, and thank you for watching and listening, and have a good night.